Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Faces of Carlsbad, coming to you from the Carlsbad Foundation building here in the center, in the heart of Carlsbad, New Mexico. And we're very pleased to be with you again, as we always are, because we always can tell everybody that we're sponsored by Intrepid Potash, and it's coming to you from beautiful Carlsbad, New Mexico, and we always have nice people to interview. And today, I'm very pleased to introduce a very close friend of mine, Miss Ivy Brown. Ivy, welcome to the show.
Hi, Bob.
Now, you don't want to be bashful on this one, because if you do, the cameraman gets, well, he has a nervous breakdown.
Okay.
So just speak up and be happy about the whole thing.
I'll do my best.
Okay. Now, we go back a long ways, don't we?
We do.
I knew your mother and dad many, many years ago when Mom in particular was working in Walmart.
Mm-hmm. No, Grandma was working in Walmart.
I mean Grandma.
Yeah. Mom's a nurse.
Mom's a nurse. I knew that. But your grandmother, it was so nice. She, every time we'd go into Walmart, she would say, "Hello, folks. How are you?" She was always so pleasant, and
Yeah.
she's still doing a nice, pleasant job with all of us, I guess.
Yeah, she's not working anymore, but she did work in the flower department and made beautiful arrangements there for years.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
It was nice work.
Well, what we do in this show, Ivy, is to make sure that the people understand a little of your background, your family's background, and where they came from originally.
Oh, right.
And so if you'll just start us off on the grand tour of the Brown family.
Okay. Well, my grandparents moved here from Southern California, Imperial, back in the 70s, I believe. And then they raised my mother, Jennifer, and my uncle Mark here. I was born in '87, exactly on your birthday.
That's right. We have the same birthday.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
And I was born and raised here until I turned 18 and went to college. So I went to UNM in Albuquerque, where I studied biology. And
What got you interested in biology?
well, I guess I started to grow fond of it when I was a young child, and I always was fascinated by nature. And when I first took biology at PR Leva in the 8th grade, I already had an idea that it was something that I wanted to pursue and continue. And then throughout high school, I took a lot of science courses, and one of my very favorite teachers was Mr. West.
Oh, yes,
Steve West.
Yes.
Yeah, he's an ornithologist, but he taught a variety of biology classes, including Chihuahuan Desert Lab, AP Biology, and I decided in high school that it was what I wanted to get my degree in.
Well,
college.
he's connected with the wildlife newspaper that comes out every so often, so he's still involved in it.
He's very active. Once we actually did a trip together to Otero Mesa, the endangered grasslands, and we did some surveys, and he was always working to try and keep Otero Mesa wild.
Yes.
And then at university, I decided to pursue biology and did a lot of really fascinating courses there, and got to travel. I minored in French, and I went to France for the first time on a 6-week course. It was a cultural study. It was called Paris à Provence. So we went from Paris to Provence, the southern region, and we did a lot of really interesting stuff. We saw some beautiful cities. We went to the Cannes Film Festival. Maybe you've heard of it?
Oh, yes, that's very famous here in the United States.
Yes, and we were just like let loose. Our teacher, he disappeared for a few days, and we all just ran around Cannes. It was very fun, and then I fell in love with Paris, and I decided I wanted to go back to Europe, and that was my first taste of Europe, I guess.
Now, going back before your grandparents, where did their parents originate, do you know?
Well, my grandfather's family was from California, I believe. His grandmother was from Oklahoma, and she was actually Cherokee Indian. And I think some of my grandmother's family traces back to Nebraska. And so her parents moved to California, so it was Nebraska, California, New Mexico, as far back as I know.
Wow.
They also lived a bit in Oregon, but they had trouble in Oregon, and they ended up moving back down to Southern California, where it was a little easier to make ends meet, I think.
Yeah.
And they moved to Carlsbad originally, my grandmother and grandfather, because my grandfather found work here.
Oh,
And
I
it's
see.
actually a bit cooler here in terms of temperature than
Is-
it is in the valley
Oh,
in
yes.
California. It's very warm there. 120 in the summer, I think.
Death Valley area in particular. Yeah, yeah.
It's very warm. I was just there recently, actually, visiting some family. It's a pretty nice area, though.
What city was that?
They're from Imperial.
Imperial.
Mm-hmm.
Well, California is a very, very beautiful place,
It is.
but they have a lot of traffic problems that
Yeah.
I don't like to run into.
I'd say it's one of my favorite states, though. Besides New Mexico, of course.
Well, my favorite states are my home state of Ohio
Ah,
and New Mexico, and I think one of the prettiest states in the United States is Montana.
really? I've
Yeah.
never been.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But for excitement, you have to go to California or Florida or Nevada.
Colorado is also nice.
Yes, it is. It's beautiful.
But I'd have to say I'm partial to Europe in
Yeah,
general.
well, we're going to get to that. So anyway, you were involved with your New Mexico University, and you got involved with, excuse me, a part of the interesting things that you could run across would be the study of biology. And
Yeah.
so where did it go from there? I mean, after you spent how many years 4 years at New Mexico U?
Yeah, at UNM, I was there for 4 years, and I was part of an undergraduate internship in which I worked in a laboratory with West Nile virus and short-term viral evolution. I also did a lot of mosquito work, seeing how the virus evolves within the mosquito itself. Because viruses evolve very quickly, you know, in comparison with, say, you or I, humans.
Well, was it dangerous working in that environment?
Not too dangerous. I was dealing with mosquitoes that were infected with West Nile virus on a fairly regular basis. But with the right procedures and safety, you can do that kind of work without a high risk. And even if I were to have contracted West Nile virus, a lot of times in a person such as myself, like a young, healthy person, if you catch West Nile virus, usually you'll have flu-like symptoms and you'll be a little bit ill,
Yeah.
but then you usually quickly bounce back. So I was never too worried. West Nile virus is definitely a potentially deadly thing to become infected with, but at the same time, it's not nearly as dangerous as, say, HIV or other viruses that are almost always life-threatening.
Ah, I see. Wow, but that's still, if the parents knew about this, I'm sure they worried a little bit about you.
No, they knew I was being safe,
Oh, okay.
so they weren't too worried.
How did they know that these particular mosquitoes had was carrying the West virus?
Well, we would infect them ourselves
Oh, you
for
would.
various experiments. We had different strains of West Nile virus with different levels of genetic diversity. So some strains of virus that we dealt with were genetically the same across the board, and other strains of the virus we worked with were very diverse. Like there was many subspecies is not the right word, but we'll just say many genetic variants of the virus within one, and we'll infect mosquito populations by giving them a blood meal that is spiked with this West Nile virus. So you make a blood meal, the mosquitoes feed off of it, they become infected,
Oh, I see.
then you monitor the infection and you gauge how much the virus is changing genetically within the mosquito. It's very fascinating work.
I was wondering how you would get one of those needles into a mosquito. Now you explained it to
Yeah.
me. Now I know.
They do infections like that as well, though.
Is that right?
There are some experiments where they will actually inject a mosquito, but I didn't personally do those. I just gave them a blood meal that had the
But
virus
they're
within.
so tiny. How could you do that? That was a fascinating.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
you would really have to have a very steady hand on that, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I did thousands upon thousands of mosquito dissections for that job, because for the work we did, we'd have to take different parts of the mosquito to analyze the virus within, and so you'd have to take legs, midguts, which is essentially the digestive portion of the mosquito body,
Yeah.
and then salivary glands, which were very tiny and difficult to extract, and you do have to have a steady hand, and you deal with tiny instruments.
Oh
and-
my goodness.
yeah, but they're not so tiny under a microscope.
Oh, that's right. You would have to have them under a microscope.
Yes, indeed.
Well, then, when you got out of the university, what did you hope you were going to be doing?
Well, I decided to work for a year because I wanted to save a little bit of money. So I worked in another lab, an immunology lab with T cells, which was interesting, but I really like virology more and knew that I wanted to continue that eventually. But in the back of my mind, I always knew that I really wanted to travel and explore before I went on to study more. And so I decided a good way to do that would be to become an au pair, which is essentially a nanny. And so
that means, for those who are not familiar with that, you take care of the children while the parents work, correct?
Pretty much, yeah. And so it's really very easy to find a family if you deal with the right websites and agencies. You can find nice families and you can interact with them and see if maybe there's someone you'd like to go live with and work for, because when you become an au pair, it's more than just babysitting. You don't just go for a couple hours and say bye. You live with them and you completely share. The term au pair comes from, it's originally French, and it entails the cohabitation idea that surrounds becoming an au pair. Like, you live with them, you engage in the lifestyle, you share culture, you share everything, really. I was really lucky in that I had a separate house from the family, even a small villa, and so we were, it's like you're part of, I was part of the family, but I still had some separate living space. Many au pairs live in the same house. They become like a daughter of sorts, you know, and they take care of the children, and they might help some light chores and cooking or something like that. But it's really like becoming part of the family.
What state did this occur in where you became an au pair?
In Belgium, the northern half.
Oh, so it was over there that this happened?
Yeah, in Flanders, the northern half of Belgium. So originally I wanted to go to France or Belgium because I spoke French and I wanted to perfect my French skills. But then this very nice family in Flanders, where they actually speak Flemish, a Dutch dialect, they invited me to come, and I thought that it would be a good idea because it never hurts to learn another language, right?
Oh, no, not at all.
So,
that's fantastic.
And Dutch is very interesting, or Flemish rather. It's like I would say it's a combination of English, German, and French. It's difficult to learn, but once you get the hang of it, it comes quite naturally because it's a Germanic language, just like English. So for an American, it's definitely doable.
My gosh. So you've been living in what city in Flanders?
I lived in a small town called Waregem, which is between the French border and a larger town called Ghent, or Ghent.
Oh, Ghent.
Ghent, yeah. I was only like half an hour from Ghent and half an hour from the French border, so it was really easy to just pop over to France. It was just 3 hours from Paris, the same distance from Amsterdam if I wanted to go to Holland. Brussels, the capital, was just an hour away. It was really like in the heart of Europe, a very good location.
That's, did you ever get to Luxembourg?
I didn't. It's on the list, though.
Yeah.
I'll make it there someday, I'm sure.
Yeah. So, and you really enjoyed your time over there in Belgium?
Yes, I loved it very much. It's a very beautiful country, friendly people, a lot of language diversity. Belgium actually has 3 national languages: French, Dutch, and German. There's a small percentage.
Yes, on that eastern border area.
Yes. By Germany, there's like 3% of the population, I think, speaks German.
Well, anyway, the French-speaking people have been very kind to you over there, haven't they?
Yes, yes. I love the Francophone culture, and the language is fantastic. Their food is amazing.
You were telling me something before we went on the screening of this particular program, that flying airfares are very cheap over there compared to United States.
It's true. There's certain airlines that are within Europe that you can find flights for 20, 30 euros, and you can go to a variety of places. For example, I flew from Brussels to Greece. I think it was 50 euros. And Greece is clear across Europe. And it was equally inexpensive to go to, say, like Edinburgh or Dublin or Barcelona. Like you can, if you find the right deals, you can travel incredibly cheaply, much cheaper than your typical inter-American flights.
We'll have to investigate that. Our government's going to have to look into this, because if they can get away with it, why can't we?
Yes, exactly. I agree.
Oh my gosh. Well, do you plan to, in the future, ever visiting any other part of the world on your world tours?
I do. I've always wanted to go to Africa. I would love to go on a safari or see the pyramids in Egypt. My boyfriend and I dream of going to Australia and New Zealand as well, maybe India. Yeah, there's many places on the list. The list goes on.
On and on and on. Well, you know, our cameraman, Guy Lutman, he was a famous African hunter. He and Ernest Hemingway did a lot of shooting of animals in Africa. And when I first met Guy, I told him, you're going to have to calm down. You can't do that anymore. The animals are perfect. Oh, my goodness, look at that. The cats even got in on the act. Well, I tell you, so what do you do in your spare time?
Well, currently I'm trying to spend a lot of time with family because I was gone for almost 2 years, and so I'm back spending lots of time with family, a few friends. I play guitar pretty regularly now. Yeah, I actually wrote my first song recently in Dutch.
In Dutch?
Yeah, I made it for my boyfriend. So.
What's the name of it? Say it in Dutch.
The name of the song? Pepijn, ik wil je vrouw zijn.
Say that again.
Pepijn, ik wil je vrouw zijn. Pepijn is the name of my boyfriend, and it means Pepijn, I want to be your lady.
Oh, isn't that sweet? Oh, you'll have to teach Guy and me that. That's fantastic.
Next time I'll have to bring the guitar on the show.
That's right. So anyway, do you do a lot of reading too?
Yes, a lot of reading. Yeah, I always have a book. Right now I'm reading an interesting book called 101 Things You Don't Know About Science, and nobody else does either.
Well, one of my favorite authors, and I don't know if you are familiar with him, was a mystery writer called Georges Simenon.
No.
He was Belgian.
Oh,
he was
really?
a Belgian writer. And all of his writing dealt with the police inspector in Paris, in Paris,
Oh, that sounds
as they call it. Right? Paris, right?
Yeah, Paris.
Paris. Well, I've been to Paris and I've been to certain sections of France, but I've always enjoyed traveling by train when I'm in Europe.
Yes, me too.
Because you can see the people, you can see the land. And when you're flying, there's nothing wrong with flying, but you're in a world of your own up there.
And then you have to be in an airport. And
oh, yes.
Trains are definitely the most comfortable way to travel, I'd have to say. Especially in Europe, the trains are fantastic. They're very easy to navigate. They're generally cheap. And they go everywhere. The trains in Europe will take you almost anywhere.
Yeah. Well, have your parents and your grandparents, have they been able to visit you?
They were, actually. My mother and grandmother came last summer, and we went to Paris and London together. Yeah, it was very nice.
Oh,
yeah,
Paris
we had a
and
lot
London,
of fun. Yeah, we saw a lot of sights. There's many, many things to see in London. Far too many for 4 days.
Oh, no, you
There's
can't.
so many sites.
That's right. Well, anyway, it's been just talking about some of these places has been very relaxing for me today.
Yeah, it's like going on a little mini vacation.
Yes, we've been on a mini vacation, haven't we?
Yeah.
So at this where you're working now, then you're going to be dealing with what actually are you going to be dealing with in the minute we have left?
Well, I work at the Carlsbad Environmental Monitoring and Research Center in the Organic Chemistry Laboratory, and we take air samples from various parts of the WIP facility, and we test them for organic chemicals that may be present, and we use mass spectrometry to determine the levels of these chemicals in the air to make sure that they're safe for the people that work there.
Ah.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating work, and everyone at, I feel very fortunate to work at CMERC because I think it's a great facility, and there's a lot of very nice people that work there.
And the company's called CMART?
CMERC.
CMERC.
Carlsbad Environmental Monitoring and Research Center.
Oh, I see. Okay.
It's kind of a mouthful, so they have to make an acronym.
Well, they have to change it to a Dutch name or a French name. It'd be well,
Even
what
more
about
charming.
the atmosphere around? Is it fairly healthy?
Yes, they also do a study there called, and they do whole body counts. Anyone in Carlsbad can go get their whole body count at CMERC, and they test the radiation levels of the citizens.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Themselves, and it's not any high, we don't have any higher levels of radiation in our bodies than any other citizen that lives in the United States. And so the WIP facility is not harmful to our health as far as we can tell.
Okay. Well, Ivy, I want to thank you so much for being our guest. I know you're a busy lady. And
no problem. It was my pleasure.
On behalf of Channel 23 and Intrepid Potash and our cameraman, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Bob.
And to all of our wonderful viewers, all I can say is goodbye and good luck.